Thank you for joining Conversations for College Success. Thank you to my current subscribers. And if you're a new listener, I hope you will become a subscriber. I am talking with Jeff Williams, who has an amazing background. Not only has he been in the military, and I recently found out he wrote 120 books for little ones. He also wrote a phenomenal book as well for adults. So let's start with Jeff. Well, first, thank you for joining me. And
Happy to be here.
second of all, why did you decide to go to college?
That's a very good question. I was the first generation in my family to go to college. My That was not something that was a luxury afforded to my parents, either of my parents, my grandparents, or my great grandparents. Although all of them had successful careers in different ways, that was just not something that happened. But as a child, I loved school. I loved learning. And it was always instilled in me that there was this thing after high school that was just what we did, what someone does. So I decided I worked hard in college or in high school. I was salutatorian in my class. Now there's only in the little town where I was
Congratulations.
in, there's only 100 kids, but still that was, something. And
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yes.
And yeah, wanted to go to college. Never even thought it was not an option. Yeah,
All right. Well, then, how did you get to the military? I'm going to deviate just a little bit. How did you
sure.
go
Well, it
there?
relates to college because college is expensive. um, and my parents and I were arguing a little bit. Really I had two possibilities when I was in high school of what I thought maybe I would do. One was medical, wanted to be in the medical field. My parents wanted a doctor for sure. Um, but I also knew that was 11 years of school, extra school.
Mhm.
And there was not going to be a way to pay for that. I didn't, we were not a wealthy family at all. We were, a middle class family with three boys, and that was going to be too much for my parents. So I looked into the academies. I was actually applied to all four of the military academies, and actually was um, I think I was fourth alternate or third alternate to West Point, second to Annapolis, and I could have gone to the Coast Guard Academy, but I decided I wasn't really sure I wanted to be on the ocean all the time. Um, so I kind of thought maybe, my other option was education. And so again, college is expensive. Um, and I decided that at the time there was uh, a program through the military that was a 6-year enlistment. It was 2 years of active duty, and
Mm.
you saved up a certain amount of money, and the government would double or triple it. So
Oh,
that
wow.
basically I would do 2 years of duty. And military service is another big part of our family. You know, uh, I think the only war that someone in my family has not been in is the Spanish American War, and that just is probably. I mean, it might have happened, but I just can't confirm that. But all the others, all the way back to even pre-revolution, military service was always something that was important to us. So I signed up for the 2-year enlistment, and then I got my money for college, and then started my career just a couple years after my peers that I graduated with. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And thank you so much for your service.
Oh,
We really do appreciate that. And quite frankly, coming from a line of a family who have done that, thank you for all that service. It is very much appreciated. So now you decide to go to college. And how
mhm.
did you decide on your major?
Well, that was my other passion growing up. Was I either wanted to be in the field of education or in the medical field. Both of them are good helping people kind of fields that I knew I was drawn to. And I had always loved. I was the oldest great grandchild, the oldest grandchild on both sides of my family. So I grew up kind of like taking care of little ones a lot, and actually loved that. I mean, it just was something that came naturally to me, and always thought that that was such a great thing. And my parents had a lot of friends who were teachers, and I admired them so much. I mean, I just, thought the world of them. And so it was a career that I always thought was a noble one and one that
Mhm.
I felt passionate about. And so I decided when I decided that the medical side of things was just a bridge too far for me
Too expensive,
financially
yeah.
and time wise, I decided on education, and I'm very glad I did.
Oh, and I'm sure all the schools are. As I mentioned, you wrote books, and we'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
little bit. In terms of your college experience, before we delve into a little bit more, had you had an opportunity to do any co-ops or internships before you became a teacher?
Ohio State had a program, and it was called FEEP, Freshman Early Education Experience. And I think it was one of the best things that they did. I don't know that it exists today. I'm not sure. Um, but at that time, what they did was in your freshman year, you spent a quarter in a school,
Oh, nice.
not doing student teaching because you didn't have the credentials or the abilities to do that. But it was a way to it was an internship. It wasn't paid. You paid the university. And then you went
To
and,
have that experience, yes.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you paid for your own, experiences there, but, it was really meant to designed to help people decide early whether this was
Mhm,
actually the field that you wanted to be in or not. And so we got a variety of experiences, not just at one grade level,
mhm.
and then we had a seminar once a week, um, that where we discussed we had papers and we had readings and things to do. But I thought that was a really clever way to help because I unfortunately knew other people who went for a long time at other universities and then came to the conclusion they didn't want to be a dentist or they didn't want to be a whatever else.
Mhm.
So that's the closest to an internship before I got started with things.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, and then there's, obviously during your coursework as an educator, you have student teaching, which is an internship in and of itself. But that
Right.
comes towards the end. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's amazing though, because probably if more universities did that, more people would know ahead of time whether or not they wanted to teach or that that could be a follow up in terms of a later field to get into.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't probably be having such a hard time finding teachers because it
Yeah.
is, you're either passionate about it like yourself. I was too, but I ended up not teaching,
Hmm.
or you're not. And
Hmm.
so to have that experience early on helps set up so many parameters and things for you to help you to be successful, as well as a lot of people start out wanting to be a teacher and then end up not being teachers. Again, that experience would be huge in terms of helping people to be successful.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to your college experience a little bit. And what did you enjoy most about college?
Oh, I
Did you
just
enjoy college? No, just
I
kidding.
loved it. No, I absolutely loved it. And I spent a quarter at Ohio University. I spent a quarter at New Mexico State University, and I really liked both of them for different reasons. But Ohio State was where I always had wanted to go. They had a very good education program. They were well ranked, and I'm first of all, I'm of the belief for sure that in most fields, college, it doesn't matter what college you go to, it's what you make of the experience.
Right, that's correct.
Um, but there are some programs and some, universities that have a particular, whether it's vet school or whether it is, education or business or law, they have
Right.
a better reputation than other
Mhm.
schools. They have more resources and perhaps better teachers and that kind of thing, or better
Right.
experiences. For whatever reason, they've got some prestige with it. I'm not in a field where that really matters a huge amount, but it mattered to me. And so I was able to say that in my undergrad experience, I had some of the top people in the nation
Oh,
in
great.
literacy education at the time, just as my undergrad teachers. And so that was a really great experience. But I have to say I loved The people I loved. It was a large university. It felt like college. Um, it was daunting at times. I might have 800 people in a class.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
mhm,
I thought 200 was a lot. Oh my
mm-mm.
God. Okay.
Yeah, and you had 3 days of lecture and then 2 days of, like, a smaller, maybe 20 or 30, or sometimes even 10 or 15 with a TA or something, but, teaching assistant. But, yeah, we were in the large, uh, halls with lots of people, and just the variety of coursework that I could take, Russian history or, um,
Wow.
studying the Holocaust, in the '80s, that was like a fairly new field to offer a whole course on,
Hmm.
and that was an amazing, experience in itself, so lots of things, yeah.
Well, wow, I hadn't even thought of it from that perspective. So, in many respects, the larger the college, the more opportunities and the more classes and things that you could take. So, that was phenomenal. And I just, I can't even imagine being in a class with 800 or 799 other people. Again, I thought 200 was a lot. And so, that's a baby class
Well,
in many respects. Um, so now that we talked about what you enjoyed, was there anything you didn't enjoy about being in
mm,
college or Ohio State?
um, hmm, I didn't enjoy there were aspects of a very large university, that could be hard. I mean, we had a faculty advisor, and access to that person sometimes was a little bit hard, or
Mhm.
we had to walk clear across the campus to the far end of the spectrum for signing up for a course. And then the education building was, 15 minutes away by foot. There was a bus system. And of course, I learned how to use that. And I know that, we thought we had died and gone to heaven at some point in 1988 when we started to be able to register by phone um, for a class instead of in person. Um, so there was a little bit of that, but really, I didn't ever feel like I was lost in the system. Even in those large classes, there were still opportunities to kind of have a cohort feeling. I I didn't enjoy. I mean, there were times where I felt like it was just a never-ending sea of work, right? Like and Ohio State at the time was on the quarter system, which meant I had, you know, 4 or 5 classes, for just a couple of months, and then I had another 4 or 5, and then I had another 4 or 5. So in 1 year's time, 9 months really, I was getting a lot. I was
Right.
getting 2 or 3 years of high school, it felt like. Um, Luckily, I, had money saved to the side from my army days,
Mhm.
and I had a lot of scholarships. I actually made money on on college. That's a hard thing to say for somebody, and my parents never had to pay out anything.
That's great.
Um, and it was important for me to do that on my own.
Mhm.
But it did take a lot of effort. And I remember thinking many times, like, really, is it really worth? And I'm one of those people, I can't just take a course. Like, all right, there were 800 people in there. I was number two in that class when it finished of Russian history because I was really interested in it. That
Mhm,
was the
mhm.
period right before the Berlin Wall fell. And I'm one of those people that just puts all of my effort into that. So college was hard, but it may not have been quite as hard as I made it because I wanted to have, top ranks and top, it was important to me. So yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, and I'll be honest, I wish more students had that level of dedication because we don't find that as much, today. When I was at Cleveland State, unfortunately, students thought that, a D was no big deal. I'm like, "A D? What do you mean a
Mhm.
D is no big deal?" "Yes,
Yeah,
it's no
no.
big," so which means you really shouldn't get an F either. I mean, but again, different time, different sets of,
Yeah.
I'll say, expectations and experiences. So that does make a difference. But obviously, and I, with you, did quarters. I'm honestly so glad I did quarters because I don't know, it just seemed like even though
Yeah.
it was a lot of work, you just progressed faster.
You
I'm
did. You
not
could
sure I
check
could
off
have
so many things.
exactly. I'm not sure I could have spent an entire semester
Yeah.
on all those classes. I just I don't know if I would have the attention span, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And,
So,
I also think about, when you were talking about both passions and your drive for whatever, I think that was another thing about a large university, not to say that you can't find these same opportunities at a smaller one, but, we had a certain number of electives. I had to take so many, as an elementary educator, you have to kind of have a background in lots of things. So I had to take so many science courses, and so many had to be physical science versus biological. But I was able to look at, taking things like astronomy, uh,
mhm.
or anthropology, and things that I really was interested in. I was not interested in chemistry at all. I had had it in high school, or physics. Neither one of those really made a difference to me. But and so and I took one in meteorology, right?
Oh, neat.
Because I've
Yeah.
always been a weather buff. And so I was able to find courses that I was actually interested in. Russian history,
Mhm,
Western European history, or the history of the Holocaust, um,
mhm.
to satisfy those things, so that, I didn't, the one course I got a B in was geology. And it truly was, I did not care about rocks. I did not. I, I mean, I thought it might be interesting. I don't know what I was thinking. Um, but it was not that much fun. And, it showed. That was the only B I had in college. I mean, that was
Oh,
that
wow.
was it. And I just could not get more, I couldn't get myself to care more about a rock.
Well, but you know what the nice thing was? You did have that opportunity to essentially dip your toe in
Yeah.
a variety of different arenas and areas, which actually makes you a much well-rounded
Mm.
person. And you can talk literally almost about anything, even rocks,
Yeah.
whether you want it to or not.
Yes.
Amazing. It really does make a difference,
Yeah.
and that's huge. But one of the things I do appreciate that you mentioned is you made those decisions and choices.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether or not you need to go through an academic advisor or not, but I've run into recently a number of students whose college experience has been extended
Mm.
because they were put into classes that they thought were correct and
Oh,
really
yeah.
weren't. And
Yeah.
so you're now taking classes you don't need to take, which now delays your graduation.
Yeah.
And some as much as 2 years. It might be a semester for some, a couple semesters for others, but it could be 2 years. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I always wanted to select my own classes and decide what I took and
Yeah.
not have someone else tell me what to take,
Yeah.
whether it was in my major or not. So,
Yeah.
absolutely. So now we've gotten through that. Let's talk about now, I don't think you are, but where have you worked? Because I don't think you're, well, you are or you aren't. You
Yeah.
have retired. But having
Yeah.
said that, where
Yeah.
did you start out? And then tell us a little bit more about your career.
Sure. So my first 3 years of teaching were in Whitehall City Schools, which is a suburb of Columbus.
Mhm.
I had student taught at that building, and when a position came open, before I even graduated, they kind of offered, me to apply, and that worked out well. And I was very happy there. Matter of fact, I just had lunch with a former student, who was in my first year of first grade way back when. I just met up with her a week ago, a week ago today. And it was just a wonderful reunion. She was, just what she remembered, what I remembered. It was a great, great little thing. Yes, I taught there for 3 years, and then I moved to the Cleveland area, and I taught in Chagrin Falls village schools for 7 years. I was a second grade teacher there, and I loved that work. But I also knew I wanted more, and I had been doing some speaking, um, uh, uh, and Solon. They had hired me because they were looking for um, teachers who were being a little bit more innovative in language arts, particularly with reading. And
Okay.
that had always been a passion of mine from college. And my connection with Ohio State remained even after I graduated. Uh, and so we were doing some innovative things. So Solon hired me to do some after school work with their teachers. And I did that for about a year. And then they offered to create a position for me, a literacy coach position that they had already been thinking about. And those were newer positions in the year 2000. Now they're more common to have literacy or instructional coaches in buildings. But at the time, that was kind of a newer thing. And Chagrin tried to get me to stay. But Solon offered a whole nother layer of diversity. Um, they also had a very different view of professional development and what
Okay.
they put their money into teachers, not
Oh, nice.
programs, not
Right. Oh,
software, any of that stuff. And so I decided to take a leap and do it. And I also got trained in reading recovery. That was another stipulation that I made for them was I wanted this extra training. Um,
okay.
and they brought reading recovery to Solon that year, and which is a one-on-one intervention for first graders. And
Right.
so I worked in Solon from 2000 until 2021 when I retired from
Wow.
them. So I worked there for 21 years,
That's fabulous.
33
Congratulations.
years in the, or really 34 years. Plus I was able to buy my 2 years from the military. So that worked out too. Um, and I was a K4 literacy coach. I was the only one in the district when I was first hired. And then about 2003, I think, I became the K6 literacy coach, and then it was K12. And then we hired other instructional coaches, and then I was kind of, and I still am working for them in a consultant manner, helping those coaches plan professional development for the teachers and keeping their literacy, program on par. Solon is now 13 years in a row being the number one school district and out of 615 districts in the whole state. Uh,
Wow.
Even though we are a very diverse district, a lot of people think of Solon as just being a very, we're only 59% white. We have, uh, $2 million homes and trailer parks in the same, settings. And we have, I think, something like 43 languages spoke, double the state average in EL population. And yet, with all of this diversity, we continue to grow. And because Solon really embraces diversity and really looks at that as a positive in a lot of ways. So it was just something I really loved about them. And then after I became the K-12 kind of literacy coach, then in 2012, a position opened where I could get an extra year's training at Ohio State, which I wrote a grant for and was able to get paid for. And it meant I had to travel to OSU once a week for 2 days for an entire school year. And Solon was nice enough to say, yes, we believe in this work, we believe in the training. And then I became the reading recovery teacher leader for Solon schools, and that includes 14 other districts in the greater Cleveland area. So
Wow.
currently, and I'm still that, even though I retired.
You sort of retired, but
It's sort
okay.
of retired, yes. So I told them that I would keep hold of that job until they were able to train somebody, and they're just training someone this year. She's in the middle of her training year. In the meantime, Ohio State called after I retired and said, "Would you become the reading recovery teacher leader for Ohio State?" So I took a position there. I only work part-time and I'm mostly at home, but I'm also in charge of 7 other states' implementation of reading recovery, where I help other
Wow.
teacher leaders be able to get their implementation going and all of the things. And then I also teach for the university,
Wow.
one graduate class a week.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, so
Hey, other people think they're busy. You're really busy.
I am busy. I am busy. This is why you don't get an email back from me immediately a lot of times. I could be anywhere. Yeah.
It's impressive, and it's one of the things, I'll be honest, I wish the Cleveland schools was doing, and I don't know what they're doing, so I'm not trying to
Yeah.
judge or whatever, but that kind of innovation, that kind of stepping out to see what can we do to make sure our students are reading and at a decent level and those kinds of things. Now, obviously, it takes money, and so
Yes.
those are
Well,
not things that every school system has.
Yeah,
However, reading is so critical to someone's success
yeah.
that that maybe I'll talk to some people at Cleveland
Well,
and see if they
actually,
can
I
talk
would
to
love for
you.
you to talk to them. We currently do. I have 27 teachers in Cleveland that I work with, and I adore them. And they are fantastic teachers, working in some of the highest poverty schools in the nation. They outperform suburban teachers all the time in what they're able to do with this very intensive training and support. Unfortunately, the state of Ohio governor's office has decided that they want only scripted programs because, of course, the government only believes that teachers can't possibly have this much knowledge on their own and be able to do things. Everything has to come from a script and from a program. And so I will likely lose Cleveland Public this year, because of the political pressure that's coming from, well, the governor's new Department of Education and Workforce, because he, took over Department of Education and dissolved it, because he
Ugh,
didn't like the direction that they were going in. And so it's a very curious thing right now because that ability that Cleveland has had now since 2013, um,
10 years.
it's
Wow. Okay.
taken away from them. They're not allowed to choose that as an option, to continue that. So you can ask them, and I hope that you do, but it is one of those things that like they're being told they can't do it by the state. So it's just sad
Well,
state of affairs.
what I will say is, from my own personal school of thought, where
Mhm.
there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
So I will have a conversation
Yeah.
and see. And now my contacts are not necessarily in the educational piece, but they are in a piece where they're trying to help students make decisions about their careers to try to help prepare them, whether
Sure.
it's for college or trade or whatever. But certainly, I will have that conversation, and I'll make sure that they listen to this particular
Good.
podcast,
Yeah.
because
That
I
would be
think that
great.
makes a difference too. One of the things I heard, and I was really disturbed at a conference I went to, was that if by the third grade students did not know how to read, they were already building prisons. I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" I could not believe off of third grade. I mean, they really have at least 3 more years through sixth grade to figure out how to read. But
Yep.
again,
Mhm.
it's the lack of funding, the lack of understanding, of just a whole host of things
Yeah.
that people think that building prisons is the way to go
Yeah.
instead of taking that money and trying to make sure that students learn how to read. All
Yeah.
right, let's move forward a little bit more. And I do
Sure.
appreciate all of your information as it relates to that. And I'll try to make sure that the right people get this
Mhm.
particular
Good.
podcast. Um, we talked about why you got into education. We talked about that you were tapped by the Solon schools, which congratulations, I think that's wonderful. Are there any other comments so that we can kind of wrap this piece around education that you might like to share about whether it's your experiences or other experiences that you think teachers should experience to help them to be better at what they do? And I'm not saying what I have found is you to be a teacher, you have to love teaching. You
Mm.
have to love working with students,
Yeah.
or you will not be in that field and you will not last long. I can
Yeah.
promise you that.
Yeah.
Um, but any other comments as it relates to that?
Um, I think just, I think you've kind of summed that up that, it's imperative that you enjoy uh teaching, the act of teaching and all of it, because it's not easy. That's for darn sure. And certainly that you enjoy children. And one of those early experiences I got to have was in seventh and eighth grade. I got to do high school and then primary, all of those things. And I learned right away, I don't really want to be with adolescents. Like they're not fun people to me. Now, there are lots of teachers who do that work,
Mhm,
and they feel the same way about kindergartners, that they don't, the little ones scare them. Well, for me,
mhm,
it's the opposite. So
mhm,
it's important also that you might love children, but you may not love all of them in the same way, because they all have their challenges and differences. And um, you need to find that niche that works for you. Um, Not to say that you can't change that over time. You can certainly, But I think that that's an important part too. And then, there are lots of elements of teaching that are difficult. Mainly dealing with state mandates and changes and all of that stuff. But the best part, if you can just keep your mind focused on the work, which is the children, and looking at, there's nothing better than knowing that you helped somebody come to some new understanding about something.
Yes.
Even if you don't see that payoff in first grade, when I met back with my former student and just looking at the way her life is unfolded, and just to know that you had this much of a sliver of that story,
Mhm.
just it's amazing. It's worth all of the toil. Yeah,
Well, and I have to agree with you. I did my student teaching 7th and 8th grade, and that's when I decided I'm not going to be a teacher. Should have done seniors, because I could have done, was it ninth through 12th? But honestly, being in college, I felt too close to their age. And I just thought,
yeah,
oh, I don't think they're going to listen to me. I don't think,
yeah,
so I did the other, and I didn't become a teacher after that. So I agree
yeah.
with you.
I mean,
However,
it's not their fault. They're just literal walking bags of hormones. They're different personality every day of the week because they don't have the choice for that. I don't That's not something I wanted to to be a part of. I hated adolescence as a child. Why would I want to watch others go through it? Yeah.
say I completely agree because then I had my own career, but when I got back into it, it was with seniors in high school because I worked for YOU, and then I went into Cleveland State, and college was my group
Yeah.
because up until that point, you're not required, money isn't out of your pocket. Now you have a vested interest. You graduate in what you do. So that was my sweet spot. So I
Yep.
completely agree with you
Yep.
and I completely understand.
Yep.
Although I adore the little ones, I think they're so cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the beauty of education.
Right.
People find their niche, they work
Yeah.
well, and it works wonders.
Yep.
All right, now, what advice would you give to current college students? And then the other part is that's going to be what would you give to recent college grads? But let's start with current college students now.
Now is the time to really, again, I can't stress enough, be applying yourself. Um, as much as you can. You don't think that that one low grade matters, and frankly, there in some places it may not, but it also may be the difference between getting a really good job in the kind of school that you want to be in versus a job that will pay the bills and that you're not really thrilled about, because frankly they're not really thrilled about you either because you've got something on your docket there. So, it's a matter, and again, we're all humans. I understand we all have, periods of times where, just like me, I made choices not to apply myself in geology. Um, Shocking as that may be. Uh, but this is the time to really pull it out. It is worth the effort. It may not feel that way right at the moment, but the payoff is really, and keep at it even when you want to quit. I mean, there were so many times where I was like, oh my gosh, really? And I didn't have a support system to go to my parents and say, hey, when you had this problem, what did you do? Well, they didn't know what to tell, they just said, study harder. That's all, whatever. There it is. That'll fix it. Not always.
Right.
Um, so, know that you've got counselors, know that you've got friends, know that you've got resources. Use those to your advantage when you think it's getting out of hand for you. But really, honestly, you've got to keep going at it. It is well worth it. The payoff is definitely there. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, to do it. As far as recent grads, I think, again, I count myself as lucky at being in a field, and I think this is true of most fields. I don't know for a fact, but we're required to keep up extra, certain number of hours of
Mhm.
education beyond your degree. Um, it's also important, at least in the field of teaching, in most districts, the more you, after you're hired, the more education you add in, exponentially, you get paid more for that. I
Mhm.
did not get my master's until I was 10 years into the teaching field. That was a mistake.
Okay.
Do that sooner. And
Mhm.
it's I know it's a hard thing because you've just started your first job. You're just doing that, but before you've got a family, before you've got anything else, take the initiative to go ahead and get that coursework done to get your master's degree because it will pay off so much in your salary gains over time. Just do it. Trust me on that part of it. So I missed out on 10 years of really good salary incentives because I just kind of dragged my feet with, getting my master's degree. Um, so that's important to do. And most districts or many districts in Ohio, I don't know if all of them do, but they offer incentives to, get some of your tuition paid or for instance, if you work in the Columbus area, most of the districts have reciprocity with Ohio State. So the district gets a certain number of free credits because they take
Mm.
on student teachers or whatever. And so when I lived there, I got all of my grad work was free.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so look for those places where you've got university ties. Cleveland doesn't have that, or at least that I know of. In this area, there's not, but Ohio State was a big school, but get that secondary certification early. Do that
Mhm.
master's work while you're in the groove, and it will pay off financially to have done that.
Well, thank you so much for your time and that advice. This has just been a wonderful conversation. I truly, truly enjoyed it. And I learned so much more about you. There's some things I didn't already know.
Great,
So thank you so much. And also, thank you for our listeners. I hope you've learned a lot of information. I certainly have from Jeffrey Williams. And if you're a subscriber, again, thank you. If you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. And we will talk again next Wednesday. Have a great day. Bye bye.